Okay, we're starting the tour, and here we are at the EO Bull Center for the Arts. Originally, the EO Bull Center was an administrative office. Bursar, the Digital Media Center started here, but EO stands for Elsie Olita, and Elsie Olita was one of the first African-American staff members of Westchester University, then of course Westchester Normal School. So that's what the EO stands for, Elsie Olita. Okay, we're here at the President's Memorial Walk, and that originally was the President's Walk. They added Memorial recently to the name of the walk, and you'll notice there's only 12 trees. We're on our 14th president, so we still have 2 presidents to plant trees for, Dr. Weisenstein and of course Dr. Adler, but since it's now the Memorial Walk, we have to wait until their untimely demise. Okay, behind me you'll see the marker for the Frederick Douglass speech, and Frederick Douglass gave his last official speech prior to his death on the Westchester campus. Now, I haven't been able to find out exactly where, but it wouldn't be, most people would think that it would be in Phillips in the Asplund Auditorium, but that wasn't built for another 50 years. So it was probably in Recitation or in Old Main. And you'll see just the remaining arch of Old Main and a little story connecting our South Campus Sturzenbecker Center and Old Main. In 1971, when Old Main was torn down, a resourceful faculty member, Russell Sturzenbecker, came by with his 10-by Army surplus truck and loaded on the archway from good old Main Hall. It was kept in a secret location until such time as the Health and Science Building was renamed for one Dr. Sturzenbecker, and mysteriously the arch was found. So believe it or not, it could be another Phil Tripp story. Okay, you'll see one of the circles, we'll see several on this tour, but this is from the class of 1940 Criterions. But one of the other stories behind this seating area, the Women's Center, and especially Robin Garrett, started the Montreal Massacre Remembrance here. And it was named in honor of the Montreal shootings of a number of female engineering students by a disgruntled male student at the University of Montreal. And so every year for a number of years we would gather here and remember those victims and hope for an end to the violence. Okay, this is the Westchester Peace Garden, and after 9/11, after the attacks on the World Trade Center, there was a spontaneous gathering that night of students on the quad here, just as a way of coming together and remembering and talking about what had happened. And the official recognition was on September 12th. We had a formal meeting on the quad, and right after that we petitioned and put in a peace garden to remember the victims of 9/11. And for a number of years, student government has planted 3,000 flags, one for each of the American citizens who were lost in that tragic event. Okay, everybody's familiar with the Whispering Arch that we have in Phillips here, but I'm going to show you the one place where every day it has the correct time, and that's the sundial on Phillips, which you have to come through, and it's getting a little overgrown, but behind me you'll see on the side of the building the sundial of Phillips. Okay, here we have the arches of Phillips, and if you remember back a number of years ago, prior to our current university logo, we had the arch with a tree in the middle as a symbol. Well, if you look through that arch, where the artwork is ahead of us was a large tree that resembled the one in that logo. However, it became diseased, it was cut down, and the trunk was given to a local artist who then carved it, turned it upside down, and now we have our... Here we are at the JP's Circle, and the JP's were first-year students in Dr. Adler's first year. She asked the orientation office to select 50 first-year students, because after all, she was a freshman that year too, and followed them throughout the 4 years. They provided counsel. She would call them up on occasion to get input about different things on campus, and then would invite them to dinner. So this circle remembers the Just Partners, or as she called them, her JPs. Okay, here we are at recitation, and of course you can see it was built in 1892, but this marker also brings out a couple of pieces of trivia with Westchester history. This was the first mailroom on campus, also the first bookstore, which is of course in Sykes, but this was also a women's residence, so recitation has served many purposes over the years. Okay, here we are at the Ram statue, and actually I'm going to talk a little bit about Francis Harvey Green. Behind me is the old library, which is of course called the Francis Harvey Green Library, but we have a new Francis Harvey Green Library, and if you go into that library, one of the things you'll see is a portrait of Francis Harvey Green. When they dug out that portrait, it was a little corroded from being in this library for a number of years. They cleaned it, they found his favorite saying was painted in the background of that picture. Look it up. Okay, we're at the outdoor garden, which is a combination of actual vegetables, and yes, you can pick them. We've got some tomatoes. We also have a number of flowers growing, and we do have some signage. But also, if you come over here, we have a bird feeding, and it attracts a lot of the local birds. So you can actually come over here, watch finches, other birds feeding, pick some vegetables. It's all good. Okay, behind me is Erringer Hall, which of course is one of our older gymnasiums, known as the Purple Gym. But up top, that cupola is two different colors. And that's because a few summers ago, about 5 summers ago, we had a lightning strike up there, and it literally caught the cupola on fire. And at the time, fire company had to come. You can see they've replaced some of the tiles around the top. One of our local firemen actually fell through the roof, but he was okay. But they had to decide, do we replace it or take the cupola down? Well, it was more good than not, so they decided to recopper the cupola, and the newest is the brown. The old is the patina, the green copper. So the older part is the green, the newer is the brown. Here we're at the lower level of Hollinger Fieldhouse, and this is our memorabilia room. You'll see everything from marching band uniforms to old uniforms, a lot of old trophies. But this is the admission sign for the football field, Old Wayne Field, which is now where Allegheny and Brandywine Halls are. That was the football field back in the day before it moved down to South Campus. And it was named for General Wayne from the Revolutionary and Indian Wars, who was from this area. Okay, and to conclude the tour, it's appropriate to end up at the Alumni Plaza, which of course is named in part for Herb Lee, who was quintessential faculty advisor to student groups, always on campus. And I'd be remiss if I didn't tell one Herb story. He would always hunt down his advisees, and you couldn't escape Herb. And he'd email them, he'd call them, he'd do everything to track them down, and sometimes it didn't work. So he had one final way to always get his advisee. He'd go down and sit at the checker station in the food service here in Lawrence, because, as he said, they gotta eat. So, since we're at Lawrence, let's eat.